So we just talked about the firm's labor demand decision. The other decision that the firm is making in this model is an investment decision. And this investment decision is going to be guided by the general principle that the firm will invest up to the point where the marginal cost of investing equals the marginal benefit. So then we want to ask ourselves, well, what is the marginal cost and what is the marginal benefit? Well, let's see what the marginal cost is. What we want to do is look at what profits are in the current period. So those profits are the quantity of goods that the firm produces minus the wage bill minus investment. So what you can see here is that if investment goes up by 1 unit, profits go down by 1 unit. So profits are the opportunity cost of investment, and the relationship is 1-to-1. So that says that the marginal cost of 1 more unit of investment is just equal to 1. To understand what the marginal benefit is, let's just look at the version of the firm's profits in the future. So what are they? Well, it's the goods that they produce in the future. It's the wage bill that they pay in the future. And then there is this liquidation value of the capital stock that's left. So now we can imagine that if you have 1 more unit of investment and therefore 1 more unit of capital in the future, well, what's the benefit going to be? Well, higher capital in the future is going to allow you to produce more goods in the future. So that means that YF would go up. So that is the marginal product of capital in the future. And then the other aspect is that if you have 1 more unit of capital in the future, then after it depreciates, your liquidation value will go up by 1 minus delta. So the marginal benefit is going to be the marginal product of capital in the future. That is how much more output you can get. Remember, this is defined as delta YF over delta KF. The marginal increase in profits is going to be the marginal product of capital plus 1 minus delta. And then we want to put that into the same units as the cost. You incur the cost today. You're generating the benefits in the future. So therefore, we have to divide that whole thing by the interest rate to get what the present value of these benefits is. So the standard rule for a firm that's maximizing profits, the rule is that a firm that's maximizing profits will invest up to the point where the marginal benefit, which is this whole left-hand side, equals the marginal cost, which is the right-hand side. And then through some high-level mathematics, we can simplify this to look like equation 14, which on the left-hand side is what we would call the net marginal product of capital. So it's the marginal product of capital net of depreciation. The right-hand side is the real interest rate. Well, why does the real interest rate show up there? The reason is that the real interest rate is the opportunity cost of investing. Because what else could the firm do with those profits? Well, the firm could go out and buy some alternative asset like bonds that pay this real interest rate of R. And so the opportunity cost then of investing is that the firm is not getting interest on those bonds. Because the consumer owns the firm, equation 14 doesn't hold, then it must be that the firm is either overinvesting or underinvesting. And the consumer would be better off just putting her savings into bonds. So that's what leads to the idea that if for some reason the net marginal product of capital is less than the real interest rate, then the firm must be overinvesting. As the firm reduces investment, that means that future capital is going to be lower, and therefore the marginal product of capital in the future will rise. And they'll do this up to the point where this holds with equality. Okay, so optimal investment then is going to set the net marginal product of capital equal to the real interest rate. As the real interest rate rises, the opportunity cost of investment also goes up, okay, because you could invest in buying bonds instead. So then that's going to reduce investment, which reduces capital in the future. But then that raises the net marginal product of capital in the future. And so what we're going to get is that the demand for investment slopes downward when the real interest rate is on the vertical axis. And that's exactly what this relationship says. The firm's demand for investment goods. And you should see that there is quite a strong analogy here between the firm's demand for investment goods and the firm's demand for labor. Remember that the demand for labor was just given by the marginal product of labor. And so the demand for investment goods is just the net marginal product of capital. And anything that's going to change the marginal product of capital in the future is going to shift investment demand. So one obvious factor would be if total factor productivity were to rise in the future. And another factor that would cause a shift in the firm's investment demand decision would be if they were to inherit a lower capital stock. Both of these would raise the marginal product of capital in the future. Why is this the case? Well, because if you have go into the future with a lower capital stock, then you're going to have lower capital in the future, and that's going to make the marginal product of capital higher. So this graph shows what happens to the demand for investment goods if either you get higher productivity in the future, or you're expecting higher productivity in the future, or the capital stock that you go into the future with is lower.